co-host will be Jeff Kerr. You see his smiling face. But undaunted, we are joined by the usual co-host, John McMullen, who's got COVID testing duties today. But he always hops on to get the show off on the right foot with us. Mr. McMullen, no, you had bird duties yesterday. Coordinators in the house or on the Zoom, depending on how you look at it. I went back and listened to the meetings that you guys had with them. Anything jump out at you, JM, that you didn't think was going to be said, or was it what you pretty much knew was going to come as soon as you got in front of both of the coordinators for the Philadelphia Eagles?
It certainly is when Shane Steichen is talking. Shane does not give you anything. He makes Mike Groh look like the most. He makes Mike Groh look like a Bill Belichick dissertation on long snappers. I mean, he does not offer up anything. I try to figure out why. And when you're a coordinator for the side of the ball, the head coach is the expert on. Maybe you don't feel comfortable saying certain things. Obviously Michael Clay, the Eagles special teams has actually been really good from a coverage perspective over the first two games. And Aaron Cepas has been great. They had the blocked field goal, but nobody cares about special teams to begin with. They should, but they don't. So it's always about JG. He's the headliner. He's like Sinatra playing the lounge, and everybody else is just the opening act. So he tends to give you something. I mean, look, part of it is the opponents, but the Eagles defense has been pretty good over the first 2 weeks. From their perspective, you got to get 2 wins. They're top 5 in total defense, top 5 in scoring defense, top 5 in third down defense, top 5 in passing defense. But they haven't turned the ball over. So that's what I asked them. How much of that of a concern is that? And you and I, Jody, talked about the hits principle, the hits philosophy. They haven't turned it over. But you can't teach turnovers. No matter how much these coordinators say, you can't teach turnovers. You can go get a Marlon Humphrey, like I said yesterday, guy who has a knack for it. But it's always about the players. And I don't know if the Eagles have many playmakers on the back seven opposite other than Darius Slay. But, it's one of those things where you can't count on them from week to week. So I have a difficult time criticizing the defense. I mean, if they stay top 5, and that's going to be difficult, obviously, with the schedule upcoming, starting with Dallas, and then you have Kansas City and obviously Tampa Bay close as well. If they stay respectable, that's pretty good.
John, I wanted to ask you about the whole Brandon Graham thing, and I caught a gist of the press conference that I guess it was more Jonathan Gann gave coach speak for, well, really everybody's got to step up for Graham, but who really is it going to be?
Well, I mean, I think in the sense that they're going to keep with the rotation. I mean, they believe in the defensive line rotation. So I think it's still going to be a 4-man rotation. From that perspective, I think he's telling the truth. But obviously, you got a main guy. And if you want to get your best players on the field, well, one of the two, Derek Barnett and Josh Sweat, has to now play left defensive end. And that's ultimately where I think they're going to go, because I don't think they want to really ramp up Ryan Kerrigan snaps at this stage of his career to starter-like snaps. And then the fourth guy I think is the wild card is Milton Williams, because when they drafted Milton Williams, they kind of said they thought he was very similar body type-wise, skill set-wise to Brandon Graham. And that was their hope, to turn him into that type of player. Now, Brandon's natural position is outside, and he moves inside. Milton's natural position is inside, and he moves outside. But I think he's going to have to ramp up playing a little bit more on the outside.
John, you mentioned that they may have to move if you're trying to get your 2 best guys on the field, and you don't worry about positional sides of the ball, then it's pretty easy what he's going to do. He's going to get Sweat out there. And Sweat seemed to be the guy who moved last week more so. How difficult is that? We've seen it more so on the offensive line when you try and ask a guy to come from the left side to the right side. There's no stunting on the offensive line. Every once in a while, you ask a guy to pull, but it's not quite the same as stunting. But they stunt all the time on the defensive line. How big an ask is that to move a guy from one side to the other at the defensive end position?
Yeah, again, it talked about too. It's usually, sort of player dependent. And you look at it on the offensive line, and we always talk about Andre Dillard, who seemed defeated before he was even on the field trying to move sides, whereas other guys may not be comfortable with it, but they just put their head down and try to fight through it. And I think that was one of the concerns about the Eagles. Not that Andre Dillard failed, the fact that he didn't want to try to fight through it as hard as perhaps he probably should have. So it's player dependent. Some guys are really comfortable with it. Brandon Graham would be an example. He doesn't care. Are Derek Barnett and Josh Sweat going to be that same type of player? Just have to wait and see. Obviously, I think they're both willing to do it. I don't think that's a concern. How comfortable they are doing it, you just got to wait and see.
John, one of the things I guess it's a topic of controversy this week in Philadelphia. Jalen Hurts throwing the ball across the middle of the field. And the next gen stats obviously tell the picture here. He doesn't. Do you think that's more on Jalen Hurts, or do you think that's Nick Sirianni just trying to not elaborate on Jalen Hurts' so-called weakness?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of both. I think he's hesitant to pull the trigger at times, and that really affects you throwing the football to the middle of the field. But let's be honest. I mean, they haven't called a lot of plays in the middle of the field. So the coaching staff, and they've admitted that was part of the game plan in Atlanta. There's a lot of underneath stuff to the outside. Against San Francisco was a lot of deep stuff because they were down the two starting corners. So most of it was game planning. And to me, that's the interesting question. I've talked about this a lot, Jeff, already. Are they game planning specifically for the opponent, or are they game planning with the note that Jalen doesn't do this very well? Obviously, the second part is far more concerning than the first part, because, and I talked about this with Jody yesterday. We were told that this season was about answering questions, and the biggest question in this transition phase is, okay, where are we at quarterback? Is this our quarterback for the future, or do we have to go look in a different direction next off season? Well, if you don't allow the quarterback, if you don't take off the training wheels and allow the quarterback to throw the football over the middle of the field, how are you going to answer that question? How are you going to answer that question affirmatively or negatively? So if this continues the way it's going, and I don't think it will, I don't think it can, but if it does, the people nobody likes, Howie Roseman's got to step in and say, Nick, this is about more than beating Dallas on Monday night. And I know coaches never want to hear that, but that's the truth.
John, on the defensive side, the Cowboys down a key wide receiver, but they have a roster full of wide receivers. They got a lot of wideouts on their roster. And judging by their first couple of weeks of personnel on the field, they still don't look afraid to go to 4 wide receiver sets. Now, they got 2 very good running backs. They don't put them both on the field, which I should get your take on that too. Whatever happened to the Gainwell and Miles Sanders on the field? Yeah, 21 speed. We haven't seen a lot of that, have we yet?
Tony offense.
I get excited. I put the Eagles personnel groupings for the first 2 games. 21 speed. Guess how many times it's been on the field, guys?
At least
twice. The first 2 games. Once
in 2 games. Yeah.
One time. It goes the way of 21 Pony. I always go back to 21 Pony. Darren Sproles, Donnell Pumphrey. Donnell Pumphrey was a rookie. Everybody looked at his stats in college. No pads. T-shirts, shorts. These two look phenomenal together. How are you going to deal with it? And the pads come on, and we got to block somebody, and they scrap 21 pony. Same thing with 21 speed. 21 speed. Yeah, don't expect much of that.
Little overstated. And the Cowboys don't do it either with even though they've got two primetime backs, they don't put them on the field together. It's a one back set, or it's a no back set, 4 wide receivers. If that's the case, if the Cowboys ended up running a lot of that, who's the extra cornerback on the field? Does it matter, or is it a matchup thing, or is there a specific order where somebody comes off the bench and is in their 4 cornerback look, or are they going to go to a 3 safety look more often?
There's a lot of ways they can go. Obviously, structured in the top 3 corners are blocked, and by the way, they're also playing at a pretty high level, which I think is one of the pleasant surprises through the first 2 games is just how well Darius Slay, Steven Nelson, and Avonte Maddox have played. Now, Avonte didn't play a whole heck of a lot because they were worried about San Francisco's running scheme, and they played Jannard Avery more, and they really had these run packages ramped up. So it kind of, if Rodney McLeod was healthy and ready to go, I think they'd be more likely to play big nickel and play the 3 safeties. So it kind of depends on what Jonathan Gannon wants. He always talks about it. And he's proven to be that through the first 2 games. He really has come up with different game plans for different opponents. So it kind of comes down to who he's more comfortable with against the matchup. But when you're talking about the 4th corner on this team, and that's why you got to cross your fingers and say, you got to hope those top 3 guys I talked about stay healthy, because then you're down to Zach McPherson or Andre Shure, who just got here and has played well on special teams, and Mac McCain, who just got here. You don't want those guys on the field. I think he would default to big nickel and have Epps and Wallace because they played a little bit longer. It becomes easier when Rodney McLeod comes back, though.
John, when I did my stock up, stock down for the Eagles this week, I was a harsh grader of Devonta Smith. I gave him a stock down. I thought, you're basically matching up against a 5th-round pick in your draft class. You're a top 10 pick. You should beat him. I think he only had both his catches were against Leonora, but he only had 2 catches for 17 yards on 7 targets. What was your evaluation of Devonta Smith Sunday?
Rookie sort of hiccup that you knew what was coming. I thought, there was one play which I brought up a couple times where it was really Jalen Hurts' fault. He didn't get the football out on time. It was designed to get Dallas Goedert underneath. They would have gotten an easy first down. For whatever reason, he hesitated, maybe got a little bit greedy, and he went for Devonta Smith. They were sort of cutting off the field in the typical high-low read, but this was a low-high read. So it was Goddard first, Smith second. And I don't know this for a fact, but it certainly looked like Devonta assumed the ball was going to Dallas Goedert because that was the plan, and didn't really finish his route or run his route the same he would typically do if the football was designed to come to him. That just from watching the film is sort of speculation, but that is a typical rookie mistake for a receiver. The ball's not coming to me. I can take a little bit, not take a play off, but I don't have to run it like I normally run it. And then all of a sudden the quarterback doesn't get the ball where he's supposed to, and he's looking at you, and you're not open because you didn't run the route the way you're supposed to. Obviously, he's a good route runner. He's just got to do it consistently. Would be my answer.
J-Mac, although the Eagles won't commit to it probably till Monday, right before the game, as to who's going to step in and play for Brandon Brooks. In the game this past week when he went down, it was certainly Landon Dickerson. And Dickerson did not grade out real well. We had Dave Zangaro on yesterday. He said he went back, rewatched the tape, and Dickerson wasn't quite as bad as advertised. Well, when you give up 5 hurries or 5 quarterback pressures and 20 dropbacks, that's not good anyway you slice it. So I'm not sure what Dave saw that made him think it's not as bad as you would in first grade. I know Pro Football Focus stuck a really low grade on him as well. How much improvement can we expect from Dickerson this week just because he gets another full week of practice under his belt and he gets to practice with the guys he's going to be playing with all week because Mr. Brooks is done for and still to be determined amount of time?
Yeah, I don't think the practice is as big as the deal is the knowing that he's probably going to start. And I think where Dave is right is he's going to start. If you were going to pull the trigger in that game, you're probably not going to go back to Nate Herbig. But remember, because they were already dealing with injuries for Brandon, they were kind of managing him during practice. He wasn't doing a lot during practice to begin with. Wasn't really doing much at all Wednesday and Thursday. Then he would ramp up and do a little bit on Friday, which is the shortest and the least heavy workload practice of the week. So Landon was practicing with the first team last week as well because they were just trying to manage Brandon Brooks. So I don't think it's that. I think it's more of he knows he's starting. He's preparing like he's a starter, and he's not getting thrown into the deep end of the pool in game after his first week back at practice, because that was also his first week back at practice as a full participant. So I think that part of it is the bigger aspect of it, and I think he will be better. But yeah, I can't. There's where Dave and I disagreed with. As a pass protector, I thought he was worse when I went back and looked at it. I thought he was fine as a run blocker, but yeah, I saw that Pro Football Focus grade. I've never seen one that low. They might have been a little bit too harsh. I mean, maybe I would have given him a 10 instead of a 4.9, but it wasn't good. Let's put it that way. Depends on the scale, I guess.
John, I don't know if you looked further into that Pro Football Focus, but I think that the overall pass blocking grade was, or like it was like a true pass block. I think it was like 2 or something like. It was actually 4. It was.
I've never seen a lower grade, so. I mean, I think that's too harsh. I think I've seen worse performances. I've seen some pretty bad performances.
Justice comes to mind.
Yeah.
Justice.
I don't think it's the worst I've ever seen, but it was not good from a pass protection standpoint.
I got to bring up Brooks again. I'll piggyback off Jody here. This is now the third major injury he's had since 2019, and for me, I'm looking at it as, okay, this guy's making a lot of money this year, next year. You have to worry, how long are the Eagles going to put up with this? And, if Dickerson plays well, if this could be Brooks' last year here.
Yeah, I mean, they were looking to deal him. Brandon confirmed that himself this offseason. So they were already at that point. Yeah, I mean, I've said since they drafted Landon Dickerson, the goal was he's going to be a starter in 2022. The question is just where. And everybody, and you know this, Jeff, everybody focused in on Isaac Seumalo. It's not Isaac Seumalo. He's replacing either Jason Kelce or Brandon Brooks. Now, in Jason's case, that's if he retires or not. If he doesn't retire and he wants to keep playing, he's going to be the center. And then that leaves Brooks. That leaves one left. And they already looked to deal him for those reasons you just said. Older player, really expensive, big injury history. And here we are in week 2, and we got another significant injury. But that's why they couldn't trade him as well. I mean, other teams are not dumb. Everybody knows he's a good player when he's out there. Just hasn't been able to stay out there. So, yeah, I mean, that's it. Brandon Graham's in that same category as well. He'll be 34 next year, makes a lot of money coming off an Achilles tear. These are the bad cop decisions Howie Roseman has to make. And yeah, I would lean in Brandon Brooks's case. I would lean on the fact that that's where Landon Dickerson's going to start next year and to replace him.
John, want to jump back over to the defensive line for just a second. You kind of mentioned that Jonathan Gannon is the kind of guy who's going to play his cards close to the vest. So he's not going to tell you guys anything in advance. Let me give you some healthy speculation. Jannard Avery did, I think, with 7 tackles, had the 4th most tackles on the Eagles last week. I'm trying to remember after watching the game live and then going back and watching it, there were no splash plays by Jannard Avery for me. That I said, wow, he stepped up there. He made a nice play there. So he did his job, but I don't know if he did that anything much above it at the linebacker position. He, of course, is a former defensive end. They seem committed to him now being a basically full-time linebacker. Because Brandon Graham's going to be done for the entire year, do they think about making him the type of player who can go back and forth between 2 positions? And will we see that starting this weekend?
They could, but it's a difficult transition to begin with. I think they like their depth at defensive line as well. To begin with. And as I said, I think the key part of this is going to be Milton Williams moving more, playing more outside than he has been. In training camp, remember, Milton played more outside than inside. It was the exact opposite. And they were trying to ramp him up for that later down the road as a potential, as I said, replacement for Brandon Graham. So I just think you speed that up. In the case of Avery, yeah, you could do it. I mean, this is probably the San Francisco game. That's probably the most he's going to play all season. That's the most you're going to see him play the Sam linebacker because of what San Francisco does. They play more 21 than anybody else. They play a ton of 12. So he wanted those big bodies on the field. He wanted Jannard Avery on the field, not as much of Monte Maddox. Now it's going back to normal. Dallas, typical 11 personnel team. Avante is going to be on the field 80% of the time, maybe even more, depending on how they game plan. And Jannard Avery's not going to play all that much. So you could, from a work standpoint, have him play both positions. But I think they would be more comfortable with Milton Williams anyway. And then we haven't talked about Teron Jackson, their other rookie defensive end, who had to play a little bit, didn't impress, but he was playing against Trent Williams. So they have plenty of help that I think they would deem as better than doing the dual thing with Jannard Avery.
John, I wanted to get your evaluation of Darius Slay. I think he's played really well the first 2 weeks, and despite the 49ers didn't even try to challenge him last week, and I think a lot of that has to do with we talk about the lack of turnovers by this defense. Well, I think he's the one guy who can actually get turnovers for his team. It's kind of like a Bryce Harper with the Phillies right now. Why pitch to him if he's going to beat you?
Yeah, I mean, I think all the Eagles' corners have played well, but certainly Darius is the key to it all, and he's certainly the number one. They played 8 quarters of football and given up 1 explosive play in the passing game. I mean, you watch these games, Jeff, you get 10 a game on certain teams. They've given up 1 play of 20 or more yards in the passing game. I can't complain about that. And even Jonathan Gannon was disappointed because obviously the 40-yard play to Deebo Samuel was a big play in the game, and it really hurt the Eagles. Ultimately, that led to San Francisco taking the lead and changed the entire complexion of the game. But you got to be realistic. I mean, that's unbelievable in the modern NFL. Now, how did they do it, though? They're playing a ton of zone. They don't blitz. Philadelphia doesn't like that. No turnovers. Look, I'd love to have turnovers, but if you ask me, would you rather have a bunch of turnovers or a top 5 defense and the second scoring defense in the NFL? I'm going to take the top 5 defense and the team that's not giving up any points.
Right.
Now, part of that is the competition. You got to be realistic. Atlanta's not good. San Francisco is not explosive offensively outside Samuel. And that's why they want to get Trey Lance on the field. At some point, that's going to change presumably somewhat against Dallas and Kansas City and Tampa. You're going to give up some plays against those teams. So it's not going to be as good in the upcoming weeks. But for right now, I have a really difficult time criticizing that defense.
John, I told you on Monday I was a little disappointed in the head coach's media availability day after that he twice leaned back on, I'm not going to address something that happened before I was here. The two questions were about Jalen Hurts not throwing the ball over the middle last year when he jumped in as a starter, and the other one was about Derek Barnett and the really foolish, dumb, awful penalty he took for unnecessary roughness. And he said, his history is his history. I clean slate when I come in as the head coach. I don't buy that. That's just me. That's how I would handle it if I were in that position as the coach. Jonathan Gannon is going to be the guy who's also going to have to deal with Barnett because he's on his side of the ball. Did you get a feeling how JG's conversation went with Derek Barnett, either immediately after the play, after the game, or since that just is the kind of play you can't have when you're trying to win games against good teams in the NFL?
Yeah, I mean, you probably didn't like his answer as well, Jody. I mean, it was similar to Nick's in the thought process that he talked about discipline and things like that. And obviously, he gets Derek, I'm sure, got a talking to from Tracy Rocker and Jonathan Gannon and Nick Sirianni because he does have a history of doing it. They're not going to throw him under the bus in a public setting, which I agree with. But more impressed was Kayvon Wallace because, JG said what I always say. That's baked in, man. That's bang, bang. There's nothing you can do about that. So you just play the next play. Right. I know how fans get so upset at those calls. That's the league. I mean, that's part of it. These coaches understand that's going to happen to you. Sometimes they're going to go your way. Sometimes they're not going to go your way. There is absolutely nothing you can do about it. That's the modern NFL. And so I was more impressed with his answer toward the Kayvon Wallace penalty than the Derek Barnett, which was more of, you got to be disciplined, you got to be smart, football IQ. Derek's been around long enough to know that he's probably a over-aggressive player. And, Andrew Sendejo was here for a little bit of while. People remember. There's a perfect example. I mean, once you get the reputation, too, the flag's coming out. So when you have a player like that, you either deal with it or you don't. And it ain't changing, is what I'm trying to say. So is the player worth it or isn't worth it? Well, they need him now. So it's not going to be about this season. But next season, I mean, it was likely they weren't going to re-sign him. They made their decision with Josh Sweat. Now it's complicated a little bit by Brandon Graham's injury, but that's more of a Howie Roseman question, to be honest. Do you deal with it? Is the player worth dealing with, or isn't he? And you move on or you don't move on.
John, what was your take on the Kayvon Wallace penalty? I'm still mixed about it. Like, I understand Kayvon Wallace's side of it. I understand Jonathan Gannon's side of it, but it's been 4 days, and I'm still not sure whether that should have been called or they were a little too harsh on Kayvon. I kind of wanted to get your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I thought Anthony Harris should have been called for a penalty, to be honest. I thought the penalty should have been 15 yards on Anthony Harris for throwing a forearm to the back of Sermon's head. And that would have been from a gamekeeping standpoint. That would have been the way they did it. The way they called it, to me, the most upsetting, I'm not upset, but if we want to use that word, that if the call is on Kayvon Wallace, I think the ball's already out. Then you can say is this a post? You have to have that conversation. Is this a post play foul? If it's a post-play foul, well, the Eagles should have had the football and got backed up 15 yards. If it's in play, as they argued, obviously it went the way it went, which is why I think the real penalty was on Anthony Harris. So I can't get too worked up about it from JG's standpoint. I mean, I don't get worked up about this stuff to begin with because it's just part of the game. And then the second part is it should have been, if it wasn't on Wallace, it should have been a foul on Harris. So who cares? You should have got a 15-yard penalty.
John, last one from me. You mentioned about how if you have your choice between having a defense that gets takeaways or a defense that ranks number 2 in the league against points against, yeah, give me the one that's not giving up any points, which I agree wholeheartedly with you. Dallas is kind of the flip.
Both, though, Jody. I'd like
if you can get both, yes. Well, you want your cake and eat it too. You and I would be the same there. Dallas is the opposite of the Eagles. They are giving up a bunch of points. They are giving up a bunch of yards, but they got 6 turnovers to this point. That does not bode well for their defense if they have 6 turnovers and they're as lowly statistically ranked as they are. How did the Eagles, if you believe that they're going to come out and be a very similar team week 3 to the first 2 weeks of the season, is there something specifically Eagles want to do to target that, to game plan around that, attack that? What do you think the Eagles do at looking at the Dallas defense through 2 weeks?
Well, I'm glad you brought that up, Jody, because I meant to bring that up, and I was gonna make that comparison. I mean, what defense would you rather have, Dallas's or the Eagles through 2 weeks? I mean, the Cowboys defense doesn't scare anybody, and it certainly doesn't scare anybody without DeMarcus Lawrence. They've had a little bit of luck turnover-wise early in the season. Look, I want to see the Eagles take the training wheels off Jalen Hurts. I don't care if there's a couple turnovers. Hopefully you generate some on your own, but this is the type of team where you should be able to go up and down the field and you should be able to score points. And I've been saying that. I don't know if the Eagles are that type of team. I certainly know they don't want to be that type of team, but at some point in the NFL today, you have to win a shootout. And I want to see, can they win a shootout? Right now, my inclination is to say they probably can't. I'd like to see them try to prove that they can. And this would be a perfect week to do it because Dallas is obviously going to score some points, even against a zone defense. They have too many playmakers. So you're going to have to score some points anyway. You might as well try to do it. Stop scheming up the quarterback so he doesn't turn over the football, which is great. He hasn't turned over the football, but you got to find out, is Jalen Hurts the answer? Let's find out. It starts this week, Monday night.
We'll see if it starts this week against the Cowboys. JM, thanks, brother. We'll get you back here tomorrow morning. Enjoy your test.
Yeah, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed for Johnny Mack. He's got to go get a COVID test if he wants to travel with the team down to Dallas on Monday night. We'll punch him up when he's down there in Dallas, too, but he'll be back here tomorrow. Jeff Kerr is here with me today. Come back. I got that much more to break down with Jeff on the Eagles and the Cowboys here on Birds 365.